Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Everyman's Thoughts. Spoiler warning, our Episode 3 breakdown is here. You've been warned, so let's get started. Episode 3 opens by revealing the fate of Arondir. He's been captured by orcs and being taken to a forced labor camp. It's likely that this is how the orcs have continued to dig tunnels to avoid the sunlight and avoid detection. We then quickly transition into Galadriel waking up from a deep sleep with a distressed look on her face. I'm assuming we're supposed to interpret this as her having a vision. We know Galadriel has the gift of foresight, and she speaks about the Southlands throughout the rest of the episode. Without that vision, she'd have no reason to do so. As the scene moves along, we get the huge reveal of Numenor with the wonderful soundtrack and beautiful visuals this show has become famous for. It's interesting that despite the long history between the Numenorians and the elves, there's a palpable tension there. In fact, we learn the Numenorians had cut off all relations with the elves a while back, and Galadriel's unexpected presence is treated akin to a diplomatic incident. I'm thinking this is the writers signaling that Pharazôn is already deep in the process of moving the people away from being faithful to the Valar and worshipping Morgoth. This would be a little weird, though, without Sauron manipulating Pharazôn, but then again, we haven't met Sauron yet, so he might have been there the whole time. Speaking of Sauron, did you notice that when Halbrand and Galadriel were being walked to the throne room, Halbrand was keen on the blacksmiths? This could be a signal that he's actually going to be Sauron, and that's going to be his in. Unfortunately, once we get to the throne room, we have another disastrous scene that just makes you shake your head. When Galadriel is presented to the queen, she has an opportunity for diplomatic dialogue. Instead, she becomes rude, disrespectful, and unnecessarily confrontational.
Then if blood be the price of passage, I will pay it. But one way or another, I will depart.
I welcome you to try.
I have no need of your welcome.
And you are quickly wearing out yours. Gods!
I have no idea why they're trying so hard to make this character so unlikable. With Amazon's history and how vocal they are about their politics, you have to wonder if outside agendas are getting in the way of them writing a great female character. Galadriel is quickly becoming another Moiraine Damodred, which was the female lead in the Wheel of Time adaptation. Speaking of outside agendas, as far as Numenor goes, in the books, Pharazôn is actually Ar-Pharazôn, the ruling king, whereas in the show, Tarmiriel is the ruling queen. I'm trying to keep an open mind, and we'll see, but the only reason I can see you'd make this change is so that Amazon can have another woman in a power position. That's great and all until it impacts the story. For instance, Sauron used to have direct access to the throne. Is he now going to be manipulating things through a middleman? Like I said, I'm keeping an open mind, but we'll see. As the Galadriel storyline continues, we find out her rescuer was Captain Elendil, father of Isildur, two names that should be very familiar to Lord of the Rings fans. As Elendil spends more time with Galadriel, we learn two things. First, there's no end to the amount of insufferable dialogue the show has to offer.
Who is this mortal who speaks to me as if he has the slightest idea who I am?
I have a daughter who runs fast and a son who runs blind. Your eyes bear a striking resemblance to both.
Where I run and how I run there are none of your concern.
Second, Elendil's actually quite sympathetic to Galadriel's cause. It's also worth scrutinizing what were the Queen's motivations when she assigned Elendil to keep an eye on Galadriel. Was this pure chance, or was she making unseen moves in support of the faithful? Eventually, Elendil takes Galadriel to the Hall of Law, where she learns the sigil that she's been running down all this time is actually not a sigil, but a map of the Southlands, later to become famous as Mordor. Furthermore, she also found a parchment that would indicate that Halbrand is the long-lost hereditary king of the Southlands and the one person who could unite his people. This was the moment I lost any remaining respect I had for this show outside the soundtrack and the visuals. They have two best friend hobbits, one of who is unnaturally curious for a hobbit and who's forming a relationship with a wizard, and a man who won't take his rightful place as the leader of his people because he's afraid he may have some of the same weaknesses as his ancestors. Does this sound familiar to anybody? They're essentially taking the major themes from Lord of the Rings and injecting them into the Second Age, while at the same time utterly ignoring or completely bastardizing the stories that Tolkien actually told for the Second Age. If someone told me this was going to happen 6 months ago, I would have laughed it off as farcically ridiculous. Yet here we are. It's like someone said, hey, instead of having Sauron manipulate the Númenóreans into betraying the Valar and worshipping Morgoth, let's just turn the Númenóreans into elf-hating bigots instead. We can toss in a complete rip-off female Frodo and Sam to meet our diversity requirements, and why not a low-budget Aragorn just for good measure? I'd say I'm surprised the Tolkien estate is allowing them to get away with this, but I think we all know what became of the estate once Christopher Tolkien died. Anyway, let's just move on. There wasn't a lot of moving the story forward for Arondir, so let's do him next, because after Galadriel, I'm going to need a few more beers before I do the Hobbits. As we mentioned earlier, Arondir is captured by the orcs and taken to a forced labor camp. It appears as if their captured slaves digging tunnels and passages is how they've managed to keep undetected so far and stay out of the sun. This also solves the mystery of where the missing townfolk went. To Arondir's surprise, several of his fellow elven tower guards have been captured as well. Now, the elves are going to pay a dear price, but they learn 3 pieces of valuable intelligence. They know how the orcs are traveling, they know how averse the orcs are to the sun, and they know the name of the new orc leader, Adar. Noting how the orcs struggle with sunlight, the elves put together a plan to escape at midday when the overhead sun should hinder the orcs. The plan goes awry when the orcs have a warg who has no such weakness. The fight scene was short but decent, nothing to write home about. However, the warg looked great. Once again, showing the strength of this show is the people that work on the visual effects and the soundtrack. Once Arondir's mates are slaughtered and he himself is brought back under control, we get the big reveal of the blurry picture of Adar. With all the secrecy surrounding it, you have to wonder if there's some twist involved when his identity is revealed. Despite a little action, the Arondir story didn't have much meat for us this week, so we're moving on to the Hobbits. When we first see the Hobbits, they are amidst a harvest festival or some other form of culturally significant celebration. As much as I despise wasting screen time on Hobbits in the Second Age and have no interest in the storyline, I do appreciate them putting in the effort to flesh out the Harfoot culture. The celebration also denotes the beginning of the Hobbit migration period, where the entire tribe will depart for a different camp. This departure causes 2 problems. First, female Frodo's friend, the stranger from the sky, is still disoriented and not capable of taking care of himself. Second, her father has an injured leg and is ill-suited for the journey ahead. This particular Hobbit tribe has a tradition of abandoning the weak to protect the community as a whole. As you might guess, as the 2 young ladies try to resolve these issues, comedic mishaps ensue. The scenes are cute and very family-friendly, but as is typical for the show, the comedy falls short. Both problems are promptly resolved when the stranger from the sky is inevitably discovered, joins the caravan, and helps the Brandyfoot family tow their cart. As I look back at episode 3 and the season as a whole thus far, we are now about 40% of the way through the first season, and we've yet to see a lick of actual Tolkien. What Tolkien stories they may be building up to seem to have been changed beyond all reason. For instance, it doesn't appear as if the Númenóreans are turning their back on the Valar and beginning to worship Morgoth. It just appears as if they're sinking into elf hatred and bigotry. And Galadriel is much the same. I never expected nor even wanted to see the full Galadriel that we know from the books or the Peter Jackson movies. But this Galadriel is such an extreme departure from the original character that I feel no connection to the source material, which is why we're all here in the first place. Halbrand having the same storyline as Aragorn on top of female Frodo and female Sam just reeks of mediocrity. especially if the stranger from the sky becomes just another wizard associated with the hobbits. All that aside, the show continues to have amazing music and even better visuals. That plus the brand name is going to guarantee Amazon an audience, but how much of that audience they have and how much of that audience is willing to stick around remains to be seen. Amazon has stated that Rings of Power is an overwhelming success, and they may be right. However, they made similar statements about Wheel of Time, but when the independent data came in, those statements were, let's just say, very much subject to interpretation. Well, guys, that's it for me this time. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you want to stay tuned to all the latest fantasy news, please hit the subscribe, and I will see you next time.